Hello folks. So in the previous video I got as far as adding in a lot of information on the board and some buttons as well. What I want to focus on in this video is adding in some towers that are going to help you defend. So the idea is that as you build up more money and you go through the levels, rather than having to shoot all these guys yourself, you can add in more towers. That's why there's a space in here. You can build towers and they're going to help shoot the enemies for you. So let's get right into it. First things first, I need to load in the images for these towers. So if I come down here, I already have this section within my code for loading in the images, and this is where I load in the castle images. Now the towers are going to be more or less in the same way. If I open up my folders here, I've got my castle, and remember that had 100, 25 and 50 for the different levels of damage. I have the exact same for the towers within the tower subfolder. So I can just copy this down and basically just rename castle to tower, and that will load in all the relevant images. So let's change that one there to towers, or just tower, and I can change all of these at the same time. So rather than castle, oh, there's a lot of castles here, change all of these to tower. Okay, 3 more. Right, delete that and replace it with tower. Okay, so tower image 100 now. Exactly the same structure. So tower image 100 is when it's at full health. PyGame image.load. And then I'm looking for that particular image. So just a little reminder, this is where the code is. Next to the code within the same folder is a folder called img. And then within that folder is one called tower. And inside there is where the images are. So that means that to load those images, I have to put in the folder names. So in my case, it's img/tower/ the image. So there's img, tower, then the images. If you've arranged your folders or image names or anything like that in any different order to this, make sure you update this, otherwise you're not going to be able to find the files. So with this done, that's going to be all the tower images loaded in. So now I can go about creating the class for the towers. So I scroll down to where I've got my castle class at the moment. So this is my castle class here. Just underneath where that one finishes, above the bullet class, I will create the class for towers. Add a little comment to say tower class, and say class tower, and this is also going to be a sprite class. So I'll say pygame.sprite with a capital S, and then I start off with a constructor. So the init method, it takes the arguments of, so always self, and then I need those 3 images, just like with a castle. Image 100 is full health, image 50 is 50% health, image 25 is 25% health. Then I need the X and Y coordinates, and lastly the scale, because again these images are pretty big, so I want to be able to control how much to scale them by. And then because this is going to be a sprite class, I say pygame.sprite.sprite, and then it's just a constructor from the sprite class. So this allows me to load in that functionality. And to start with, the only thing I want to do is load in the images and create a rectangle from the image, just so I can start putting these towers onto the screen. Now I should actually be able to copy this from the castle class, because it's going to be more or less the same thing. So just copy all of this code down from width down to where I define the rectangle positions. I'll copy that and I'll put it, oops, too far. I'll put it within this constructor method of the tower class. And I just need to tweak it a little bit, I think. So just double check. The width is using image 100, so that's correct. Same for the height. So I get the width and height of the original image, and then I scale each of those images by the width multiplied by scale and height multiplied by scale. So actually those 3 lines are also correct. Lastly, I take a rectangle from, it doesn't really matter, but I take it from the fully healed or the 100% health image, and then I just assign X and Y coordinates to that rectangle from these 2 arguments. So actually that is it. That's pretty much, I don't even need to change any of it. That's going to allow me to create these tower instances. Okay, so just to test this out, let's temporarily go in and just manually create a tower. So within the game, there's going to be a button to add them in, but for now, just above the game loop, I'll just have a test area where I will create these towers temporarily. So temporary tower, and here I just create it as an instance. So I say tower is an instance of the tower class, and then I just need to put in all of those arguments. I go back up here, the arguments were, so you ignore self, it's the 3 images in a row, X and Y coordinates, and the scale. So let's come down to where I was creating it, just above the main loop here. and just start putting those in. There's quite a few arguments, so actually, can I copy? I could probably copy what I've done here, but I'll just type it all out just so it's a bit clearer. So we'll say, start off with the images, tower image 100, then it was tower image 50, tower image 25, so that's the images loaded in. Then I need the X and Y coordinates. So we kind of need to put this over to where the castle is. The castle is screen width minus 250, so just copy that for now. And then the scale, I'll just go with the same scale as the castle so it all looks the same. So the tower is created, the instance anyway, but now I need to add it into a sprite group, because remember this is a sprite class. So I need to create groups just like I have done with the others up here for my bullets and my enemies. I'll just create another one at the top. I'll say tower underscore group. Now this isn't temporary, this is going to stay, because we'll be using this tower group for the rest of the towers. So once that is done, and I've created an instance, I can add it to the group. I'll say tower underscore group.add my new tower. Okay, so let's just run this, make sure there's no errors in the code. Okay, everything executes fine. So it's loading the images in, it's creating an instance and adding it to the group. So as far as that goes, that's okay. Of course, nothing is coming up because I'm not calling any of the methods within the main game loop. So now I go into where I've got my main game loop and I've got my groups being called. So the castle is being drawn and I'm calling the shoot method. So just underneath that, I'll add a little comment to say draw towers. And now remember, this isn't going to be the individual towers, this is going to be the entire tower group. So I can say here tower underscore group. For the time being, the only method it will have is, well actually it'll have an update method, but it'll be empty, and it'll have a draw method. So in here I put in my surface, which is my game window, i.e. the screen, and that's going to allow it to draw. I'll just explain again that the tower class here, notice I haven't created a draw method. All I've done is create the constructor init method. There is no draw method to call. However, because I have made it as a sprite class, I have inherited the draw and update methods from PyGame sprite class. So that means that automatically it has a draw method built in. I don't need to write one. I can simply call the draw method from the group and it's just going to blit it onto the screen at the location of the rectangle. So that's why it's important when you're creating the tower class, when you're creating the constructor, you have this self.image and self.rect, which creates a rectangle from the image. And in fact, as I explained that, I realized I have missed something. Because I've copied this directly from the castle, which is not a sprite group, I need to make sure that I have a self.image. At the moment I have a self.rect for the rectangle, which takes it from image 100, but I also need to assign a starting image to this when I create the instance. So self.image, well, it's going to start off with full health, so that is going to be my image. So it'll start off as self.image 100. Okay, so now I do have an image and a rectangle from it. Let's run the code again. And okay, you can't really make it out too well, but that is the tower up there. It looks a bit weird because it's kind of overlaid onto the castle. So let's move the position a little bit. Let's go minus 350 and I'll bring it down a bit on the screen. So minus 200. Let's see how that looks. Okay, it's a bit too far out now, but you get the point. There's that tower now, it's been created. So now I can start adding in some functionality to the tower, basically to get it to shoot at these enemies as they come up. So we'll do that by creating an update method within this class. So I come back up to my tower class. At the moment I just have the constructor. So underneath I can say def update, and that's going to be my update method. So it takes the self argument, and it also needs to be able to have a list or the group of all the enemies so that it can basically look through them all and then pick one to aim at. Now my enemies are within an enemy group. Remember when I created them here, I have an enemy group for them. So each instance is housed within that overall group. That means I can just pass that whole group into this update method. Let's say here enemy group, well, underscore group. And then I can do all the functionality that I need within that group, for that group within this method. So what I need to be doing here is just going through each of the enemies within this enemy group and then picking them as a target, if they're alive. So I'll iterate through the group. I'll say for en enemy underscore group. And then I just check, first of all, is that enemy alive or not? Now remember the enemy class had a self.alive trigger, so that when they're killed, it's set to false. That means that I can just check e.alive. If that is true, then I can choose that enemy as my target. The result of this is that the target is always going to be the enemy that is closest to the castle, because they're going to be created in that order. So that's how this enemy group is going to be iterated through. It'll be the first enemy created and then onto the next one if that first one's being killed. If I have this already defined, then I can get my targets. So I can say my target x coordinate and my target y coordinates are, well, I'll take them from my enemy's rectangle. So I can say e.rect, and I'll aim for sort of like the midpoint of each of those rectangles, because if you consider the fact that the bullets are going to have to travel across the screen, if the tower is aiming for like the top of the rectangle, it's probably going to miss by the time it gets to it, because the enemy will have moved. So to make it a little bit smarter, you kind of need to aim for the feet of the enemies. I'll say mid bottom, and that's going to return an x and a y coordinate for the mid bottom of the rectangle, which is what I'm storing here. And as soon as that's happened, I want to break out of all of these loops. I don't want to keep continuing, because then it's just going to keep going to the next enemy and the next enemy, and the target is going to end up being the very last one that is alive rather than the very first one. Now with this done, I want to test it out just to make sure that this is actually working correctly and is picking up the enemies for me. So at the end of this for loop, I should have a target X and a target Y. And if I do, then I should be able to draw a line from my tower to the target just to check this. So I'll say pygame.draw.line. I draw it onto the screen. The color is going to be white, and then my start point is going to be, so the start coordinates are going to be the rectangle of the tower itself. So I'll say self.rect.mid left, so the middle and left hand side of the tower, mid left 0 for the x coordinate, self.rect.mid left 1 for the y coordinate, and oops, I've got my brackets wrong around, so I should have a square bracket here to close that one. Then after this one, I add in the x and y of the target. So I say target underscore x, target underscore y. The problem here though is that if I have a situation where I don't have any enemies alive, I'm not going to have a target X and a target Y assigned. So this could end up giving me an error. What I actually want is to be able to have a trigger for when the tower has acquired a target. So first of all, I'll come back into this section here, which is my constructor, the init method for the tower class, and I'll add another self variable. I'll say self.target underscore acquired, if I can remember how to spell it. Pretty sure that's not it. Target acquired. I'll start off with false, but let me just double check the spelling on this. Okay, the spelling is right, but I'm probably going to make a typo when I write this out later, so I'll just change this to self.got underscore target. So it starts off with false, and then as soon as I have a target here, I want to change that back to true. So I'll say self.got underscore target equals true. And before I do my checks, so before I even look for the enemies, I reset that back to false. Because otherwise it will be set to true as soon as I find one, and then I could kill all of the enemies and this will just stay true. So I need to have this set to false. So I'll say self.getTarget equals false. So it'll start off as false, run through all the enemies. If it finds one, it will say, okay, I do have a target. So getTarget will be set to true. And then I can do the rest of the code within here without worrying about any errors about not having a target. I can say if self.got underscore target, then I draw this line. So now that I've got this little bit of code, let's run this update method within the main game loop and just see how it works out. I'll come down to here where I've got my enemy group, and I will just say enemy underscore group dot, it's not the enemy group, hang on, it's the tower group up here. So tower underscore group dot update, and remember this did need an argument, which was my enemy group. That's why I got them mixed up. So I need to pass in the enemy group into the tower group. Let's run this now. And there you go. So it took a little second because I had to wait for the enemy to appear. Let's just do that again. So there's nothing to start with, then an enemy appears, and now you can see this is basically the target line. So it's aiming from like the mid left of the tower into the bottom of their feet. I could change it, I suppose, because the midpoint is the little window, so you could say they're shooting from here. But I think for the purposes of it, it's fine and it'll work just fine. So now I can move on to the shooting code. Now this is going to be done very similarly to how I'm shooting from the castle. If I come up to the castle's shoot method, I start off by taking my target position, which in that case is the mouse, the X and Y distance, which I calculate from the castle to that target, and then I work out the angle at which I'm going to be shooting these bullets. So then I take a mouse click and that's what triggers it. In the case of the towers, it's just going to be on a timer, but this part of it is going to be more or less the same. So in fact, I can probably copy this down and just tweak it a little bit. So I need the X dist, Y dist, and then a self.angle. I'll copy that down into my tower class, and I'll put it just underneath where I've got my self.target. Because I'm going to be getting rid of that draw line section in a second. That was just to demonstrate what's going on in the background. So what we can do here to tidy this up, get rid of this code for pygame.draw.line. I don't need that line anymore. And then I bring that code up. Okay, and just make sure that's all indented correctly. So the X distance becomes, well, it's not pause because that was the mouse position. It's actually the target X. So I change this to have my target X coordinates minus self.rect.mid-left. So that part is still correct. I'm aiming from the mid left-hand side of the tower. Then the Y distance is going to be, again, the same. I change that to target_Y. And I take the mid-left, but now it's the Y coordinate, which I access with index 1. X coordinate is index 0. And I have to multiply it by -1 simply because the Y coordinates are flipped in the game, or in PyGame. And then lastly, I calculate the angle. So this is the angle that the bullets are going to be shot at from the tower at the enemies. I'm not changing this at all. This is exactly the same as it was in the castle shoot method. And it just uses these X and Y distances to calculate the degrees, or the angle in degrees. So now to actually start shooting the bullets, well, again, this is going to be done more or less in the same way as I did with the castle, except it's going to be on a timer. So if I have a timer, then I need to be able to record when the last bullet was shot, and then I need to set the timer variable so that I can compare how much time has elapsed. That means I need a couple extra variables added into the class. Well, the first one is this self.angle. I'm using it here, but I've never actually declared it at my constructor. So if we come back up to my init method, underneath my got_target variable, I'll set self.angle equal to 0. And then I also need one for when my last shot was fired. So self.last_shot. Well, I can't really set this to 0. I need to take some kind of timestamp. So I'm going to take the timestamp when the tower instance was first created. And I'll do this by saying pygame.time.get_ticks. So that'll just take a timestamp of when this tower was created, and then I can start counting from there onwards once I have a target acquired. So now that I've got those defined and I have a target here, I've calculated the distances to it and I've calculated the angle, then I can set my cooldown. So let's say shot_cooldown is set to 1000. This is in milliseconds. So this is basically saying 1 second. So each tower is going to shoot 1 second every bullet. And a little comment to say fire bullets. And actually you can change this as much as you like to make the game harder or easier. Basically you can delay or speed up how often these towers shoot at the enemies just to help you out. And now we need to check how much time has passed since the last time the shot was fired. So I take the current timestamp, pygame.time.get_ticks. So I know what the time is right now. I take away the time that the last shot was fired at, last_shot. And if that is greater than the cooldown, so basically if 1 second or more has passed, then I can fire the bullet. But first of all, before I fire the bullet, I need to update that self.lastShot variable, because that is now the current time at the moment, because the last shot is right now. I've just fired one. So time.get_ticks. This makes sure that it resets the timer and that we don't just keep firing up bullets as soon as this condition is met for the first time. And now I can create the bullet. So I can come up to where I've got my castle class and pretty much just copy it down from there. So this shoot method here, you notice this is where I create my bullet and add it to the bullet group. Let's copy that down, go to the tower, and just underneath here, where I was already, once the shot is fired, you make sure the indentation is correct, self.lastShot is updated, and then I create a bullet. So the bullet is an instance of the bullet class. I use the bullet image for the first argument. Then these are going to be the X and Y coordinates, so that's correct, and then the angle to fire from, or to fire at. And with that done, I assign it and add it to my bullet group. So I think that should actually be enough. That's quite a lot of typing without testing. So let's run this again and just see what happens. And there you go. As soon as the first enemy appeared, the tower started shooting it. So it kills, and you can see it's kind of aiming for their feet. So it kills the first enemy, moves on to the next one, and so on. And of course now the tower is positioned kind of in front of the castle, but when I update the positions of them, I actually want it to be kind of lined up along here, the outside, to help defend the castle properly. One thing though that you will have noticed right now is that the castle is taking damage, but the tower doesn't change image. And I have loaded in images for 50% and 25%. What I want to do is when the castle takes damage, I want the tower to take the same level of damage because it's effectively an extension of that castle. It's an upgrade to the castle. So let's add that in here now. To do that, I'm going to keep it all within the update method, and I should be able to again just copy it down from my castle class because I've already done it here within the draw method. I take all of this out and just copy that down, and then I move it into the update method of the tower class. But make sure the indentation is correct, so it needs to be lined up with all of these other, so the for statement, the if statement, it needs to line up with them. It doesn't need to be part of self.target because it just happens independently. The next difference here is the check that I had previously was self.health because I was looking at the castle's health. Well, now this self.health is going to try and look at this variable for the tower, which doesn't exist. The tower's health is going to be just based on the castle's health. So I can change this. Instead of self, I can say castle. If the castle health drops below 250, well, this part is correct. The tower's image is going to be image 25. Then, otherwise, if the castle health drops to below 500, then the next one, and otherwise the castle health is always going to be full health. Now that's all the functionality for the tower itself pretty much created, but what is missing is being able to add the towers onto the screen with a button. At the moment, my tower is just temporarily created down in this section here, but I don't want to manually add them in like this. I need to be able to control it so that you can do it within the game. Now the first thing I want to do before I add that button is I want to define some positions for where these towers will go. This one, for example, I've just kind of picked very quickly just to get an idea and put it on the screen. That's not really a good position for it. And then of course, as I add more towers, I need them to move along. So I don't want them all to appear in the exact same place. That means that I need to define some kind of preliminary positions where I intend to add towers. So it's almost like I define where I want the towers to go when it's time for them to be made. And for that, I'm going to use a list. I'll come back up to my main section where I've created the variables. So all the way at the top of the code, I have this define game variables area. And in here, I'm going to create a list that's going to house the potential tower positions. I will call this tower underscore positions, and I'll create it as a list, but it's going to house a few different towers. So I'll break it up over a few different lines. It's going to be a list of lists because each tower is going to have an X and a Y coordinate. So within this, I have my initial square bracket, and then I'll have another set of square brackets within it. So for the X and Y coordinates, I'm going to start off with, well, all of them are going to be from the right hand side. So it's going to be screen width minus a certain number. So the first tower is going to go at screen width minus 250, screen height minus 200. And these are just the numbers that I already picked when I was creating the game, but you can tweak these and reposition the towers as you like. So that will be the first tower, and I can copy this down. If I then choose to make a second tower, I want this to shift along a little bit. So actually that's going to be a slightly different coordinate. And then the third tower, well, that's going to be slightly different again. So I'll change that to 150 and that one to 150. And then the final tower, I'm going to set that to 100 and minus 150. So you may notice this means that I can only have 4 towers. I've only defined 4 tower positions, but of course you can expand this as much as you want. So if you like, you can just add a whole bunch more towers and the game can continue. You can even automate it a little bit more so that rather than having a finite number of towers, after you get to a certain number of towers, you don't place anymore, but you just add the functionality for shooting them, or you maybe just place them all at the same location so it doesn't look like you've got more towers. The option's up to you. It's kind of flexible in that sense. But now that I've got this variable or this tower position list defined, rather than creating the towers manually as I have and telling them position that way, I can just call that list. So here, for example, in this temporary section, I'm creating the first instance. Well, rather than giving it a screen width and a screen height manually, I'll take it from the list. But this line is getting kind of long, so I am actually going to break it up a little bit. So I'll come in here break that down, and just after every comma, I will just break it onto the next line. So this will keep it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So break that one down, next one, and then lastly the scale. Move that down as well, and then I move my bracket down. Okay, so it's split over a few lines now, but the structure is the same. So first of all is the 100%, 50%, and 25%. And then instead of these screen width and screen height, I can take it from that list, which was tower underscore positions. And I'll just start off with the first one at index 0. That's going to give me the first tower position. But remember, it's a list that then further contains an X and a Y in it. So this is going to be the X at index 0. And same below, tower positions 0 because it's going to be the first tower, and 1 because it's the Y coordinate. I run this again, and there we go. So the tower is lined up correctly. It does still kind of look like it's overlapping the castle a little bit, but it is now lining up in the right place. So if I want to, I can add in another tower, copy that one down, and make sure that I copy this as well, so that I add that tower into the group. But this time, I keep the second argument, or the second index value, the same, because this is always the X and the Y coordinates, but I can change which tower it is that I want. So let's say tower at index 1, run this, and I've got another tower coming up down here. So now I've got 2 towers shooting these guys. So that's kind of coming together, but still, this part is still manual and temporary. I want to get rid of this and instead have a button that's going to allow me to click and add more towers. So first I want to define how much a tower costs. I'll come back up to my section where I've got my variables, and somewhere within here I will say, well, just before the towers, I guess, I can say tower underscore cost is equal to 5,000. I want to make it quite expensive because I don't want it to be too easy. So it takes a little while before you can actually get a tower. And this way I have a variable defined for it, so I can just call this every time, and I can easily change it in one location without potentially mixing them up. In hindsight, I realized that I should have probably done the same thing for the repair and the armor upgrade. I'm not going to change it now because those videos are done, but you can, if you want to, update that as well yourself. So I've got my tower cost defined. I can come back down into the game loop, and I have a section here where I'm looking through the buttons. So I've got my draw buttons bit. I explained the buttons in a previous video, so I won't go over how all that works, but I'm basically importing the buttons module and creating the buttons from it. So here I'll be able to add another button, and that's going to be my tower creation button, which I will use to add them to my group. So before I can put the buttons onto the screen, well, I need to create it first. So I go back up on top of my game loop where I'm creating the other, where am I creating these buttons? Oh, right here. So I've got this section here for creating the buttons. I've got my repair button and the armor button. Between them is going to go the tower button. So I can say tower underscore button equals button module dot button class. Then I need to give it coordinates. So it's going to be my screen width minus 140, 10 pixels on the Y coordinate. And then for the tower image, I didn't actually need to load in a separate button image because I already have a tower. So my tower image 100, which is what I'm using for the fully healed, full health tower, I can just use this for my button as well. It's just I need to scale it down more because that tower is quite big. So that will create a tower button for me, and then I can add the functionality within the game loop itself below. Just down here where I've got my draw button section. So let's add a bit here to say if tower underscore button dot draw argument of screen so it knows where to draw it. If the button is being clicked, check if there is enough money and build a tower. So first of all, I want to check whether the castle can actually afford it. So if castle.money is greater than or equal to the cost of that tower, tower underscore cost, then we can create a tower. Now, I'm not going to type it all out again. I can just go up here where I created my temporary ones. I'll delete the bottom one because I didn't need 2 of them. And I will just copy this part down. So I'll get rid of that, cut that, tidy all this up a little bit. And then I can go back down to where the button was and just paste that into this if statement. So just make sure the indentation here is correct. It all needs to be within this if statement. So as long as the castle has enough money to buy this tower, then the code is pretty much exactly the same as it was. So I create a tower instance from the tower class, I give it these 3 arguments to start with, and then I need to choose a position for it. So I've got this tower position list which had 4 different index points, and the way I want to choose which one to use is basically I want to know how many towers I currently have. So if I have 0 towers right now, well, then I'm going to be using the very first available position. So this is going to be my first tower, which is at index 0. My next tower is index 1, index 2, index 3. So by just working out how many towers I currently have, I will know which index to access. I'll come back down here to where I'm creating these buttons, and my tower position index is just going to be the length of the tower group. So we put that as length tower group, because this is basically saying, well, how many towers do I currently have? If I have 0 towers, then I access index 0, which is the coordinates for the first tower. So that's how I build my first tower. And once I've got one, then this len tower group becomes 1. So when I create the next tower, this variable is going to be 1. So I'm accessing the next index within the list. So it's just a neat way of being able to work through that list. And I do the same thing for the y coordinate, tower underscore group. And I take the y coordinate, the scale is the same, and then lastly I need to add it onto my list. But of course, once all that's done, I need to make sure that I subtract money. So my castle.money is reduced by the tower cost. So that should be everything. Let me just run this, make sure it all works. Okay, so I've got my tower up here. I do have 5,000, so I can click that, and there we go. My first tower has appeared, and it starts shooting. I don't have enough money to create more, so just temporarily, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Go up to my castle class, and I'll just give myself a lot more money. So run that. Now I can afford to buy a few towers. So I'll buy 1, and then as soon as I click again, you can see it moves into the next index in the list, so it knows which position to put it at. And then I've got my 4th tower. So now that I've got 4 towers, well, that's all of the index positions used up. So what happens if I click this again? Oh, I got too far. Try that again. I think I've just found a little bug that we'll have to address in a second. But if I create my 4 towers and I create the 5th one, it fails and it says list index is out of range. And scroll down to where the error was. It happens here. The reason it's happening here is because I'm now trying to create another tower. So I'm going into that tower positions list and trying to take whatever is next available. But of course that list only has 4 towers, or in my case it does anyway. You may add more. But because I only have 4 towers, I need to limit this to be able to only create 4 towers. So I'm going to need another variable called max towers, and that's going to say how many towers I can create within the game. So before I assign that, I'll go up and assign it in a second. Within this if statement, I will add one more condition. I will say, and length of tower, oops, not that. Length of the tower group is less than max towers. So I will go and set this variable, this max towers variable to 4 in a second, but this additional check basically is going to say that if I currently have fewer than 4 towers, then I can create more. But as soon as I have 4, stop creating them because I don't have any more positions within this list anyway. So let's go create this variable, max towers. I'll do it right at the top within this game variable section. Say max underscore towers equals 4. So now I can run this again and I can click this. So I've got my 4 towers. I can keep clicking, but I don't get any more towers. So that's limited now. There is one more bug that just appeared that I didn't notice before though. As I kill all these guys, I think basically there's an issue with the targets. Target X reference before assignment. So if I come back into my tower class, I'm having a little bit of an issue here because I don't have a target X and a target Y variable defined if there are no enemies, or if there are no enemies alive. So that's why this is giving me a problem here. Now that should be an easy fix. I just need to make sure that I define them just before I actually get into any of that checking. So at the start of the update method, I will say target underscore X and target underscore Y, and I'll just set them to the top left corner. I'll just set them to 0. Now this, well, I'm hoping this will fix the error, but it's not going to allow the towers to just randomly keep shooting into the top left because my get target variable is also going to be false. And actually I realized the other problem is that I've got a typo here. So I have self.getTarget and self.target. So what have I named it? I've named it got target when I initialize it, and that is why that is happening. Self got target, okay. So I wonder if I even need these. Let's try this again. And I'll just create a bunch of towers, let them kill all the enemies, and then I'll just see what happens. So what should happen is my self.getTarget variable will stay false. Okay, yeah, that has fixed it. So I don't actually need to even define these because self.getTarget is false, therefore this check isn't happening, and that's why we're not failing. So I can get rid of that. So now the only last thing that I need to add in here, if I run this again, you notice I don't have a price displayed for this tower. So I can just quickly go back up to that function that I created previously, which is this show info function. And you notice I've got my draw text for 1,000 and 500 for the other two costs. In between them, I can say draw underscore text. And this one is going to be, well, I actually have a variable for this now. So I need to convert that variable into a string. So it's tower underscore cost. Then it's just going to be my font. The color is gray. And then the coordinates are going to be screen width minus 150. And for the y coordinate, I'm just going to put it at 70 like the other text. So run this again. And now you can see I've actually got the cost displayed as well. So as I click them, the towers appear and you notice the money is dropping off as well. And the other thing is, as they're killing them, it is recording as a kill. So the score and the money is increasing with it accordingly. So I should be able to upgrade the castle. There you go. So the rest of the buttons are all working fine. And move on to the next level, and the tower starts shooting them straight away. So that's going to about do it for this video. If you found this useful, then please do leave a like and feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching.